today is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godsey. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will permission. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on the certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided an important foil for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from cyclical instability and financial crises, and reduce the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life and female homemakers. But slowly, socialist championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the Leave It to Beaver ideal. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 spurred American leaders to rethink the costs of maintaining traditional gender roles. They feared the state socialists enjoyed an advantage in technological development, and why women have better sex under socialism.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Tuesday. Well, it's getting kind of grim out there, you know. It's everything that's going on with Trump and Musk and taking our government apart. I mean, we fought a revolution to stop this, and now the oligarchs want their throne back. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, are we going to start exporting prisoners to El Salvadorian mega prisons? El Salvador's millennial dictator offers to hold American criminals in exchange for some cash. And it looks like no one can control Musk, at least according to the Washington Post. In the second hour of our program, no guests today, by the way, just you and me. In the second hour of our program, the ongoing dismantling of America is underway. Also, did you know that of the 61% actually of the budget for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, 61% of their budget right now is going to Ukraine? I think we now know why Musk and Trump are going after USAID. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, RFK Jr.'s anti-vaxx group paid nearly $1 million to a woman who accused him of sexual misconduct. Say what? And Trump's, in the third hour of our program, Trump's trade war, authoritarian power, and the oligarchs. Yes, the president is a malignant narcissist and sadist with an insatiable lust for power who gets pleasure out of making others squirm, at least. But there's something else. And also, Trump's guy at Treasury just shut down the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which has claimed billions of dollars for American consumers who have been ripped off by big banks. It's amazing. And State Farm seeks an emergency 22% rate hike in California. What's this going to do to California? So a lot to talk about today. I mean, just an awful lot to talk about today. And we fought a revolution to stop this. So this is our daily take today. Now the oligarchs want their throne back. The author of the Declaration of Independence, you know, that guy, went to great lengths on numerous occasions. I wrote a book about this to point out that when he and his colleagues started the United States of America, they were explicitly rejecting in favor of an early form of democracy the men, and they were all men back then, who drove the three historic tyrannies: kings, theocrats, and oligarchs. Autocrats, popes, and the morbidly rich, basically. For 2,000 years, before Jefferson and Washington and Hamilton and Paine and Adams and Revere and their colleagues created a checks and balances system of Republican democracy, every country in the world was ruled by one of those three: by a king, a pope, or a theocrat, or the rich. And today, of the 167 countries on earth, only 74 are democracies and only 24 are full democracies. And now, because of the Republican Party, America stands on the verge of losing that status. Theocrats have seized control of our Supreme Court, gutting the rights of women and religious, racial, and gender minorities. Members of the House and Senate are so terrified of the oligarchs funding primary challenges against them that it's been over 40 years since any major legislation has passed fulfilling the wishes of the majority of Americans. And on top of that, now we're hearing reports that many Republicans are explicitly telling reporters on the QT, you know, don't quote me, but telling reporters that they are worried about physical violence against themselves and their families from the people that Trump let out of prison if they vote against Trump. I mean, that's wild. And our White House today, you know, that's your king, right? And those are your oligarchs. And our White House today is occupied by a billionaire who believes himself to be a king, or appears to, you know. Trump's attack on our democracy is an old story. It's played out repeatedly in various countries by every generation in the past two centuries, and it follows an absolute playbook. There are four aspects, what would you call them, departments, systems of governance, at least in our form of Republican democracy, and that's small r Republican. A democracy within a republic, as conservatives love to cite. And those four things are the legislative, Article 1 of the Constitution, the executive, the president, Article 2 of the Constitution, the judiciary, Article 3 of the Constitution, and the press, the First Amendment to the Constitution. Four branches, essentially. And while Democrats have been, over the last 50 years, have been focusing their efforts on, electoral politics, on seizing control of the legislative and the executive branches, the right-wing billionaires who wanted to take over America and now appear to have succeeded, or are very close to having succeeded, they focused their efforts where they didn't have to win elections, other than occasionally, where really they could just do it with money. And that is corrupting the judiciary and seizing control of the press, building their own press systems, 1,500 right-wing radio stations, 3 right-wing television stations, Fox so-called news, Twitter and Facebook, tilting hard to the right. And that, by the way, is a pattern. In other words, first take down the press and seize the judiciary. Then you can attack the elected branches all you want. I mean, all you need to do is get elected to the executive branch, and then you can just basically castrate the legislative branch. This is exactly what Viktor Orban did in Hungary. This is exactly what Vladimir Putin did in Russia. It is what Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela. It's what Alexander Vučić did in Serbia. It's what Robert Fico did in Slovakia, excuse me. And now, same, you had Mitch McConnell steal 2 Supreme Court seats and give them to Donald Trump. And so we've, and you've got this huge, billion-dollar funded massive machine to indoctrinate and move, right-wingers, fans of oligarchy, into our court system. And you have this huge right-wing media machine. They've launched now, and now Trump is trying to, really nail this stuff down. He's launching lawsuits against CBS, ABC, NBC. Robert Carr, Brendan Carr, I believe his name is, the head of the Federal Communications Commission, has announced that he's going to launch that he is launching an investigation into NPR and public broadcasting, PBS, into them for breaking the law by accepting commercials. I mean, if they can take down NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, if they can take them down or just intimidate them, you've already got, the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post on your side. You've got the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Fox News, all the right-wing media that I just described. You've got all that on your side. And they can cause all of the major national media, the 3 big television networks and CNN and MSNBC and everybody else, to basically freak out and shut up under threat of lawsuit. Then they can continue. Now, the good news here is that there are 2 countries that have seen their democracies under attack by oligarchs and wannabe kings who have reclaimed their democracy. The first was Poland. And the reason why is because 70% of the independent media in Poland stayed independent, even after Duda took over and, President Duda, and started attacking the media. And because they had an independent media in the elections in 2023, they went back to democracy. Poland did. The other country is South Korea. And again, President Yoon had not succeeded in nailing down the media first. And that's why he's sitting in a jail cell right now rather than being the dictator of South Korea, which was his goal. So here we are. Jefferson was right. Without a free press, you can't have a functioning democracy. And Republicans, and Trump in particular, are doing everything they can to intimidate our press, to seize our press, to bring our independent press under control. And I'm telling you, this is the independent press right here. It's all over Substack. It's all over Free Speech TV. It's on the Progressive channel here on Sirius XM. It's on radio stations all across the country. We're small, but we're mighty, right? We still have an independent press in the United States. And as long as we do, we still may be able to lay claim to a democracy and recover our democracy. So your assignment, should you decide to accept it, Mr. Phelps, is to support independent media, to support NPR, to push back on these attempts by the Trump administration to destroy independent media in the United States, and to back our press.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're going to start exporting prisoners to El Salvador? Really? I'll tell you about that right after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back, Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I would like to correct something that I said yesterday about the website goodunitus.com, where you can see if it's a blue business or red business, restaurant, product, service, any of that. It's goodsunitus.com. I'm not sure if I gave that full
great
wording.
Right. Thank you, Diane.
And just, we'd feel much better if we had a hands-on feel about things. And I think we can get that. I used that 5 calls yesterday and called my senator and representatives. And I said they have an obligation to represent us. And if they're not out there, spreading the word and looking strong and standing up against these Republicans and MAGAs, they're not representing us. And I said they need to get out there and be visible and be strong and be vocal. And I said they owe that to us. And I used that 5 calls app also it's very easy to locate your representatives, your senators. You don't even have to go through the hotline, in D.C. Yeah. It's really good. And it's already got it in there where you can just touch it and call them.
That's great. Thank you for that, Diane. Thanks for the
Thank
FYI.
you.
Appreciate it.
And goodbye.
Yeah,
Take
thank
care.
you. Augusta in Cape Vincent, New York. Hey, Augusta, what's on your mind today?
Hi there, Mr. Hartmann. Thank you for taking the call. I'm following up on things that I've been chasing. I do believe that Mr. Trump has become an insurrectionist when he released all these people from jail. He's joined them, and there are thousands of them in this country. There's a militia waiting to work. Also, I believe I have called and I have written online, and that doesn't work. I am asking all my friends, and I've got 15 that are going to do this, to write a physical letter to a senator or any member who is a member of any of our legislations to tell them that what they don't like about Trump, but especially to mention the fact that he is now an insurrectionist, and that's a treasonable offense, and I believe he should be impeached and taken out of office for that alone.
Yeah.
And all the other things that he's doing along with Musk and all these, that's going to sidestep everybody, because you're going to pay attention to all these other things, which are really important. Yes, they are. But they're not impeachable offense. The treason is.
I agree.
And I think
I
that
agree.
needs to
And
be
bribery,
stated.
too, is listed in the Constitution as an impeachable offense. I agree. I also agree with Lawrence O'Donnell's call last night to impeach the Secretary of the Treasury, who gave specific orders to
Good.
the Treasury Department to stand down and let Elon Musk bring his 20-somethings and their hard drives into the Treasury Department and scoop up all of our information. I mean, they now know every person in the country, or have the ability to know every person in the country's Social Security number, payment history, a lot of our medical records if we're on Social Security or Medicaid, on Medicare or Medicaid. I mean, it's just amazing. And
that happened.
It should be
And
impeachable.
then he fired the guy because he wouldn't let Musk in.
Yeah.
And who is this Musk? He's an immigrant. He came here in 2002 and became a citizen.
Right, and first he went to
really?
Canada and became a citizen, and then he came to the United States and became a citizen. This is his third citizenship, and it's crazy. Augusta, thank you for the call. Spot on. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, you know, the Supreme Court, or at least on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money. Right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out.
We crossed the sea to break the chains, left behind the tyrant's reign. No more kings, no golden thrones. We built a land that stood alone. But here they come, cloaked in greed, buying power, planting seeds, whispering lies through stolen screens, turning truth into a fever dream. Then we fought a revolution to fight people like this. Oligarchs and shadows with an ironclad fist. They stole the courts, they're muzzling the press. And if we don't stop them, there'll be nothing left.
Quarterback, 23 minutes past the hour, and amazing. This Marco Rubio right now is doing a little tour of Central America, and he just met with the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele. And this is a young guy, by the way. I believe he's in his 30s. He's a millennial. And he not only said, sure, you know, if you arrest El Salvadorans and send them back to here, we'll put them in our prison. But he said, by the way, you know, we could use a little cash. And we've got some big prisons, some nasty prisons. And if you want to send American citizens here, we will imprison them for a fee that will cost you less than it costs you to imprison them in the United States. So if it's costing you $50,000 a year to imprison somebody in the United States, we can do it here for $20,000 a year. Those are not numbers that he came up with. That's just my for example. But this is crazy. I mean, first of all, it's illegal. You can't deport somebody. Yes, you can enslave somebody because they've been convicted of a crime. The 13th Amendment says you may do that. We never actually ended slavery in the United States. We merely shrank the category of people who are subject to it. But you can't send somebody outside the country just because they've been convicted of a crime. Although, you know, apparently Elon Musk, when this was announced on X, the president of, Mr. Bukele, posted this thing on X saying, We have offered the United States the opportunity to outsource part of its prison system. We're willing to take in only convicted criminals, including convicted U.S. citizens, into our mega prison in exchange for a fee. The fee would be relatively low. And Elon Musk replies going, great! Yeah. Meanwhile, the New York Times spoke with a couple of Trump officials, people from within the White House, who are freaking out because it appears that Elon Musk has basically unlimited power. I mean, he's shutting down federal agencies. And, you know, where does he have the authority to do that? He literally does not. And yet he's doing it anyway. They're breaking the law. What are you going to do? Call the FBI? The FBI is beholden to Trump now, too. I mean, if you or I showed up at the Treasury Department or USAID or the Education Department and said, we're coming in here, we're shutting it down, we're downloading all the data off the hard drives, the FBI would arrest us. But Musk, the guy who, by the way, has massive government contracts with China and the United States, no problem, apparently. One Trump official who was not authorized to speak publicly said Mr. Musk, this is from the New York Times, was widely seen as operating with a level of autonomy that almost no one can control. Mr. Musk has a direct line to Trump and operates with little, if any, accountability or oversight, according to people familiar with the dynamic. He often enters the White House through a side entrance and drops into meetings. He has a close working relationship with Stephen Miller, who shares Mr. Musk's contempt for much of the federal workforce. And Speaker Johnson seems to be, now the House of Representatives is supposed to be the first among equals, and the House and the Senate are supposed to be the check and balance on the power of the executive. But Mike Johnson has surrendered this. He has, he has been castrated, I guess. You know, I'm looking for words here for what the Trump administration is doing to members of Congress. We saw this morning. Bill Cassidy just surrendering, just pathetic. He's like, yes, I'm afraid that Trump will, fund a primary challenge against me. He's apparently been on the phone with Trump, and he said Trump offered him some assurances. What, that he's not going to fund a primary challenge if he votes for his candidates? It's crazy. Bob Kennedy this morning passed the committee. Now it goes to the entire Senate for a floor vote. We'll see where this goes. Stay tuned. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Just a couple of other quick data points on what Musk is doing to our government, and then I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism by Bernie Sanders. This is from the introduction titled Capitalism is the Problem. They say that the older you get, the more conservative you become. Well, that's not me. The older I get, the angrier I become about the uber-capitalist system under which we live, and the more I want to see transformational change in our country. Some people think that it's un-American to ask hard questions about where we are as a nation and where we're heading. I don't. To my view, there's nothing more American than questioning the systems that have failed us and demanding the changes we need in order to create the kind of society that we and future generations deserve. Here is the simple, straightforward reality. The uber-capitalist economic system that has taken hold in the United States in recent years, propelled by uncontrollable greed and contempt for human decency, is not merely unjust, it is grossly immoral. We need to confront that immorality boldly, bluntly, without apology. It is only then that we can begin to transform a system that is rigged against the vast majority of Americans and is destroying millions of lives. Confronting that reality and mobilizing people to bring about the transformational change we need is not easy. And that's why I've written this book. We need not only to understand the powerful forces that hold us down today, but equally important, to have a vision as to where we want to be in the future. It's my strong belief that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, with exploding technological progress that will greatly increase worker productivity, we can finally end austerity economics and achieve the long-sought human dream of providing a decent standard of living for all. In the 21st century, we can end the vicious dog-eat-dog economy in which the vast majority struggle to survive, while a handful of billionaires have more wealth than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. Let's be clear. While the middle class continues to decline, the system we have today is doing extremely well for the people who own it. These oligarchs have enormous wealth. They have enormous power. In fact, for the 1%, things have never been better. They have their mansions all over the world, their private islands, their expensive art, their yachts, their private jets. Some of them have spaceships that someday may take them to Mars. These oligarchs like the way things are going, and with unlimited resources at their disposal, will do everything possible to defend what they have and maintain the status quo. Yes, we live in a democracy, but they own that democracy. They spend tens of billions of dollars on campaign contributions to both major political parties in order to buy politicians who will do their bidding. They spend billions more on lobbying firms to influence governmental decisions at the federal, state, and local levels. That is why, over the last 50 years, we have consistently seen public policy that benefits the very rich at the expense of everybody else. Yes, we have freedom of speech and a free press, but to a significant degree, the oligarchs own that media. That is why the personalities they employ on TV, radio, newspapers, and social media don't ask embarrassing questions and rarely raise issues that will undermine the privileged positions of their employers. That's why, despite the many thousands of television networks, radio stations, and websites they own, there's little public discussion about the power of corporate America and how oligarchs wield that power to benefit their interests at the expense of working families. The good news is that while the oligarchs and the institutions they control work frantically to maintain the status quo, we are now beginning to see cracks in the system. Millions of Americans are starting to look at the society in which they live from a new and different perspective. They're beginning to think big, not small. They're asking hard questions and demanding answers that take them beyond the incremental politics and mainstream ideology of today. Many of them are finding answers in union organizing as they seek a greater say in their workplaces, along with better wages, benefits, and working conditions. I know a little bit about all of this, having run two of the most progressive grassroots campaigns for president in modern American history. In 2016, my campaign shocked the political establishment by winning 22 states and more than 13 million votes in the Democratic primaries, where I took on the party's anointed candidate. That's not supposed to happen. That's not what the big money interests wanted. That's not what the corporate media wanted. That's not what super PACs and wealthy campaign contributors wanted. It's not what the super delegates wanted. But that's what happened. 4 years later, in 2020, we won the popular vote against a huge field of candidates in the first three Democratic primary states, Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. The result? A panicked political establishment came together behind Joe Biden, the one candidate they thought could beat us. The other candidates were asked to drop out. The most important lesson of campaigns was not just the list of states that we won as we took on the greed and recklessness of the ruling class, or the total number of votes we received. More important was where the votes were coming from. They were coming in overwhelming numbers from people under 40, the future of our country. In state after state and in national polls, we won the support of young Americans by landslide proportions. These voters, Black, white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, understood from their lived experience that America's uber-capitalist system was not working for them. It was not working for them economically, as they were experiencing a lower standard of living than their parents. It was not working for them from an environmental perspective, as they faced a planet that was growing increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable as a result of climate change. And he goes on, the book is It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism by Bernie Sanders. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
shut the gates, locked the doors, took the food from the kids, left the poor on the floor. Said if you can't pay, you don't belong. While his friends count gold and toast to the con. He's tearing it down, brick by brick, ripping the spine from the government quick. Trump's last job, the final heist. Leave the people starving while the billionaires slice.
Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. By the way, on my Hartmann report today, our daily take, somehow, for some reason, maybe I hit the wrong button or something. I really don't know what happened. But comments were disabled. Nobody could make a comment on it. I just fixed that about 25 minutes ago. So if you're one of the people who regularly comments on our daily take and you'd like to, it's working now. Just a couple of quickies here. Over at Wired magazine, they're talking about this guy who worked previously for two different Musk companies who was given read and write access to the Treasury Department's computer system. In other words, he could actually change the code. One source said you could do anything with these privileges, including the ability to bypass security measures and potentially make irreversible changes. I mean, this is serious, serious stuff. Talking Point Memo founder Josh Marshall said that he's already been rewriting code at the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. Not only does he have full privileges in the system, but has indeed begun rewriting the code base of this critical system. Somebody over on X posted the guy's name, and Musk canceled his X account. This one reporter says he's been hearing from sources inside the agency who feels there's no one left in the federal government to whom they can report security breaches. This is what I said just a few minutes ago, you know. Under normal circumstances, you'd call the FBI and you'd say there's some guy here who is not a government official, not a government employee, is not authorized by Congress, doesn't even have a security clearance, and he's tinkering with the code in the Treasury Department. I mean, you know, in fact, this guy says, in normal times, I'd report insider threats to the appropriate security channels inside the government, but there's no one left for me to report them to. Yeah, Trump is taking apart the American government. And in my opinion, on behalf of Vladimir Putin. Certainly if it's not, you know, explicitly on behalf of Putin, it's benefiting Putin. Also, Musk revealed that he has killed off the direct file tax program. There's this program, you know, if you live in Norway, for example, and this is true of most full democracies, most European countries, the government calculates your taxes for you, sends you a letter, says, here's what we think you earned, here's what we think you owe. If this is all right, you don't have to do anything. If there's anything wrong with our numbers, please let us know and we'll fix them. So you don't have to file tax returns. Here in the United States, not only do you have to file tax returns, but it's very, very complicated. And, you know, there's this multi-billion-dollar industry that makes a profit filing our tax returns for us. Well, you know, under good Democrats, this was the, you know, the Biden administration thing, and it goes back to the Obama administration starting this process. They had this thing called direct file where you could file your taxes with the federal government for free. Now, there's, like I said, a billion-dollar industry out here that's really pissed off about this. They want us to continue having to pay them, and so they give a lot of money to the Republican Party to kill this program. Well, Elon Musk just came out and said he just killed the program. He said in a post on X, unelected government official Elon Musk revealed that he has cut the staff of the IRS that oversaw the system that allows Americans to file their taxes for free. A right-wing MAGA influencer called the direct file tax programs a far-left government-wide computer office that was built by Elizabeth Warren. He claims direct file puts the government in charge of preparing people's tax returns for them. That group has been deleted, Musk said. Right. And finally, last night there was a midnight call on X with two senators, Joni Ernst of Iowa and Mike Lee of Utah, two right-wing senators, and Ramaswamy and Musk, in which Musk called for ending all government regulation. He said, if the government has millions of regulations holding everybody back, well, that's not freedom. We got to restore freedom. Yes, let's turn America into a third world country where the rich people can do anything they want and poor people are just trampled on. I mean, he said, if it's not possible now, it'll never be possible. This is our shot. This is the best hand of cards we're ever going to have. And if we don't take advantage of the best hand of cards, it's never going to happen, so we're going to do it. I mean, this is nuts. This is the deconstruction of the administrative state. You know, what Steve Bannon said he was going to do, Trump was going to do in his first administration, he's actually doing in his second administration. He's taking apart our federal government. So what's on your mind? Tracy in Ohio. Hey, Tracy, what's up?
Good afternoon, Tom. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. What's on your mind?
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the situation with the Department of Education. I believe that's a portent of what's to come of getting rid of the public education. I believe that also there's another way to bust up unions. I believe if they do that, what's to stop them from coming after my union that I'm retired from the UAW. And I think it goes against the grain against all working class people, whether you're union or non-union.
I agree. One of the reasons why Republicans hate the Department of Education and public schools in general is because they're unionized. By the way, the workers at the Department of Education are also unionized. There's a federal employees union. But secondly, they know that an educated America, an educated populace, is not going to go for the crazy anti-science, anti-democracy, anti-everything, the nihilistic stuff that they're proposing. And so, they're trying to dumb down America. And frankly, they've been quite successful over the last 40 years. I mean, Reagan made it, you used to be able to go to college for basically free, and Reagan made it very, very expensive. I mean, just in my family, I've got $500,000 worth of student loans among my 3 kids. This is just crazy stuff. I keep saying that, but I've got to find another phrase. But yeah, I agree, Tracy. They want to destroy the unions and they want to dumb down America. Very, very well said. Thank you, Tracy. Brad in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Brad, what's up?
I think it's going to get a lot worse, and I want you to weigh in on what I believe, that Trump is a true nihilist. And the reason I say that is the definition of a true nihilist. They believe in nothing. They have no loyalty to anything or anyone. And the only purpose they have, perhaps, is to destroy. And I think we're looking at something where Trump, he knows he's not long for this earth. I mean, he's advanced age. And being as greedy as he is, if he can't have it all, he wants nobody to have anything, a la Hitler's Nero decree to Albert Speer in March of 1945 to leave Germany a barren wasteland.
Right.
And I'll take your answer off the air.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brad. And I think that Trump has, his whole entire life had this massive inferiority complex. And to a large extent, that is because he was inferior. I mean, he wasn't that bright. He had to hire people, or at least this is the story I've read, to take his tests for him in school and stuff like that. His parents didn't want him to go to the hoity-toity prep schools that all the peers did, because then they'd discover, what a dummy he was. So they sent him off to a military academy. He was uncontrollable. His mother didn't want to be around him during the summer, so every summer she went to Scotland, which is where she was from, and leaving him essentially all alone. It wouldn't surprise me if Elon Musk has a similar past. I heard the other day that every day he was driven by a chauffeur in a Rolls Royce to school when he lived in the white apartheid part of South Africa when he was growing up as a child. These guys have just wild backgrounds that I think are informing their efforts to tear down America. And it's extraordinarily troubling. It's extraordinarily troubling. It's 44 minutes past the hour. I'm picking up your calls here. What's on your mind? Suggestions on how we deal with this? I think, we need to be, number one, doing everything we can to support independent media. That it may well be that independent media is the last thing that's going to survive, that's going to hold this country together.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It was independent media that brought Poland and South Korea back from the brink. We'll be right back with your thoughts. And welcome back. Ziggy in Oneonta, New York. Hey, Ziggy, what's up?
Tom, tomorrow I'm going to Albany, New York, to my senator's office to protest. And then again on Friday, I'm going to be doing it again down in Binghamton. And people have to start learning that you got to stop just trying to cry to Tom. You need to get out and get involved if you want to get some change here. Yep. It's not time to sit around. And how they can find out about their local group that they can go and do this with is go to indivisible.org, and there's a tab that says Visit Your Senators. And I have also put one on the top of my page, nbribes.com, that says Visit Your Senators, and that should take you directly to how you can sign up for a protest near you.
Cool. Cool.
Hey, you take care, Tom. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Gordon in O'Brien, Oregon. Hey, where's O'Brien, Oregon?
Oh, it's way down in the southwest corner on the edge of the Redwoods. It's in the interior valley.
Okay. So what's on your mind today,
Halfway between Crescent City and Grand Pass. So I wanted to talk about a caller in your third hour yesterday talked about states doing some enforcement, and I think he's onto something. States, of course, are sovereigns. Like when it comes to water, the states control water in the states, not the federal government. So when Trump released water from those Corps of Engineers dams in California the other day, that was illegal. That's up to the Water Resources Control
I think
Board.
that was a federally controlled dam or watershed.
Yeah, it is, but it's state water. The states control what the federal government does. The federal government has to get water rights from the state.
The bigger issue is that he said he was, sending water to Southern California to help with the fires and all this kind of stuff. And what he did is he drained it into a dry lake bed where it's all going to evaporate. And this is water that the farmers are going to need next spring.
But my point is, like with Elon Musk, he broke into the federal pay computer, and like he said, he's got a guy working on a code, so that means Putin get the code. But that affects the states. The states can, arrest him for that. What the states should do is they've got state police, they've got National Guard. They should just go in and arrest Trump.
I'm skeptical that any arrests or anything like an arrest are coming. I just don't see it happening.
So the issue is that the states do have a lot of leverage, because the citizens of the states have been harmed. For example, the January 6th rioters, the states all have federal representatives and senators, and they threaten their own, they threaten the state's federal representatives, the state representatives. So the states can go ahead and rearrest those January 6th rioters.
I don't, trespassing on federal property and destroying federal property is a federal crime. It's not a state crime. And Washington, D.C., at least those parts of Washington, D.C. that are federally owned, is not a state. So I think you're wrong, Gordon. I appreciate how you're thinking, and yes, we all need to be thinking out of the box and looking for alternatives, but I don't see it. Gordon, thank you for the call, though, and keep thinking. I like the way you're thinking. We'll be right back. It's 48 minutes past the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out. At 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, Dom. Always a pleasure talking with you. With all these people that said that they voted for Trump because of the price of eggs, I'm guessing they have egg in their faces right now because they're going to have a hell of a lot more to worry about than just the price of eggs, which is going up, as well as these other things that will be going because of Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, did you see? Meanwhile, hang on just a second, Michael. It's actually because of bird flu. But did you just see that Waffle House, one of the large users of eggs in the country, just put a 50-cent surcharge on every egg that they serve?
Oh my goodness!
Yep.
Incredible. But then, besides the tariffs, that's going to really be wrecking the economy. What you mentioned about the oligarchy, I got to commend you for that excellent interview you did with Greg Palast, and it pretty much exposed as to what the hell happened on Election Day, that there were many people, not the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, but millions
over 4 million
votes that were suppressed or even purged from the voting rolls.
Yep.
And then if people can't understand that, they got to figure out how the hell is it that one of the swing states, Pennsylvania, was called that very night and so swiftly, as opposed to 4 years ago when it took a whole week to get all the votes
counted. I think part of that
means
was because Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, actually cleaned up their voting systems.
I'm sorry?
I think that Pennsylvania got called as quickly as it was because Josh Shapiro cleaned up their voting systems.
But still, when Greg Palast mentioned about the number of votes that were suppressed by the GOPs,
it's massive.
Add to that,
it's over 4 million.
And then add to that, Trump holding a rally pre-inauguration saying that Elon Musk sure knows what to do about computers. He helped me get Pennsylvania. That's an eye-opener in itself.
Yeah.
So, as contrary to people saying that, we lost because people decided to stay home and not vote, the reality is that people tried to vote but were knocked off the system, knocked out of the system.
I still want to know what happened when Trump said, thanks to Elon Musk for helping us with the vote-counting computers in Pennsylvania. I suspect that he wasn't just trolling us, that he's actually bragging. But I don't think we're ever going to know. Michael, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Spot on. Christina in Los Angeles. Hey, Christina, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I just want to tell you and your viewers that something is definitely going on with not just Medicaid and Medicare, but actually the SSI and disability payments. I've been on SSI and disability for about 30 years, and it's legitimate. And for the past few years, I've been getting an income of about $1,200, combining those two, and that was my full income. Last month, the payment was only about $600, and so I called Social Security, and each time it was a 120-minute wait time. I finally got through to a local office, and they said there have been no changes on our end, but they do sign a non-disclosure agreement agreeing not to say anything. I think they really do, NDA. And so anyway, I had no recourse, and I decided to wait till this month to see if I got my full payment. Well, it's past the third, and I'm paid on the first and third, SSI and disability. And this month, I got an $830 deposit, and that's it. So, so they are, at least with me, they have cut my payments. I was on Section 8, by the way, for 25 years, and I changed my address, and they said it's a simple address transfer. And so, but I got nothing but a runaround. They kept asking for the same forms to be completed, and I got nowhere, so I lost my Section 8. So they are doing this, and they are in cahoots with the banks.
Yeah.
Because it is a full-scale coup d'etat. It's already been done. And they will crash the economy completely and totally. And it's not just illegal immigrants.
I get it, Christina. And let's not forget that when the economy crashes, that's when billionaires make the most money because they can buy cheap
you know what?
and ride it
They already
back up.
have all the money. They control the printing press. They already have the money.
I think Trump's whole tariff thing was a scam. I don't think he ever actually intended to impose those tariffs. I think he did that knowing that it would drive the market down. There was a massive number of shorts on the market, bets against the market last Friday. Those bets got paid off on Monday morning, and then Trump announced that he's not going to do the tariffs and ride the market back up. I think these guys are manipulating the market, these billionaires, to make even more money. Christina, thank you for the call. Lee in Harwinton, Connecticut. Hey, Lee, what's up? Oh, Lee, I see that.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. You've only got 30 seconds here. Is that enough for you?
Yep.
You can make it quick. Okay.
I think we have opportunity here to show Fox Television exactly what we think of them and make it a giant political statement. I'm calling for a boycott on the Super Bowl.
Is it playing on Fox stations this year?
Yep. Turn your TVs off. You're going to be able to see it a week later.
Yeah. Interesting.
Turn your TVs off. Don't buy the chips. Don't buy the soda. Show them what we think. You got to get their attention. That would get their attention.
Well, that's true. I doubt it's going to work, but I hear your call, Lee. And
let's try it. Anything.
Okay.
Anything.
You got it. You got it. I won't watch it, but I generally don't. So, Lee, thank you for the call. Oh, my. Did you know almost 2/3 of the entire budget of the U.S. Agency for International Development right now is going to Ukraine? You think that might have something to do with why Elon Musk just shut it down? The guy is talking to Russia, right? He is talking to Putin, according to the press reports.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to catalyze innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So the ongoing dismantling of America is underway. Donald Trump, according to the Washington Post, Donald Trump is preparing an executive order aimed at eventually closing the education department and in the short term dismantling it from within, according to 3 people briefed on its contents. The work is already underway. The new administration has been trying to reduce the workforce by putting scores of employees on administrative leave and pressuring staff to voluntarily quit. See, here's what's going on. Donald Trump wants to cut taxes for billionaires. His tax cut is expiring this year. And he knows that the Democrats in the Senate will filibuster any effort to pass another tax cut. So he's going to have to pass it the same way he did the last one through a process called reconciliation. Reconciliation is only available to legislation that has to do with money, and it must be what's called revenue neutral. In other words, it can't raise the national debt. It could lower the national debt, but it can't raise it. And so if Trump wants to borrow another $2 trillion or $3 trillion, or if he wants to hand himself and Musk and all the other billionaires around him, if he wants to hand them another couple $1 trillion, which he very much wants to do, he's got to kill off dollars worth of federal expenditures somewhere else so that money can go to billionaire tax cuts. Now, he doesn't have to do the billionaire tax cuts until the end of the year, because that's when the current billionaire tax cuts expire. Because, the other thing about reconciliation, it's only good for 10 years. That's why his tax cuts are expiring right now, or at the end of this year. So if he wants to have another 10-year cycle of another $3 to $5 trillion in tax cuts for billionaires, he's got to figure out a way to get rid of $3 to $5 trillion in government expenditures. So shut down USAID. Shut down the CDC, shut down the Department of Education, lay off tens of thousands of federal employees, maybe hundreds of thousands of federal employees, close these programs. Every 10, 20, $30 billion that they can save, and I put that in scare quotes, is money that they can hand off to billionaires in the form of tax cuts. That's what's going on here. Let's be very clear about this. That's what's going on here. And that's why they're going at it with the meat axe. And they don't care who gets hurt as long as it's little people. You'll notice they're not going after the program that is funding SpaceX. They're not going after the federal programs that fund and support Starlink. They're not going after any federal programs that subsidize or support Tesla. They're going after the programs that support average working people and kids in schools and poor people all around the world. So here we have now Dodge staffers have gained access to multiple sensitive internal systems, the people said, including a financial aid data set that contains the personal information for millions of students enrolled in the federal student aid program. 20 people from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency have begun working inside the education department looking at staff. Now, this is a department that administers federal grant programs, including $18.4 billion in Title I money. Title I money goes to disabled kids and both physically and intellectually disabled kids. So if you've got a special needs child, Title I pays for their education. That's $18 billion. That's $18 billion that Elon Musk could have as a tax cut. It also funds high poverty K through 12 schools. There's another $15 billion program for students with disabilities. There's also a $1.6 trillion federal student loan program. Gee, if we could move that over to the banks so that they can make all the profit and get that out of the way, you know, that might be a great one. The Department of Education is also in charge with enforcing civil rights laws that bar discrimination in federally funded schools on the basis of race or sex. And of course, you know, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this morning, you can take the apartheid out of the boy, but you can't take, you can take the boy out of apartheid, but you can't take the apartheid out of the boy. Meanwhile, the CDC's websites are being shut down left and right. Between Friday and Tuesday, this from The Guardian, Carter Sherman. Between Friday and Tuesday, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention resources for tracking, preventing, and treating HIV, handling sexually transmitted infections, and prescribing contraception have flickered in and out of existence. A guide to gender-affirming care in young people, once hosted on the website of the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Health, is gone. The National Institutes of Health website for the Office of Research on Women's Health is gone. Nancy Krieger, a professor of epidemiology at Harvard, says science is disappearing from U.S. websites. The work of government-sponsored science is disappearing. The data sets are disappearing. This analysis, this is all based on a New York Times piece, by the way. The New York Times analysis found some 8,000 pages from more than a dozen government websites have been taken down in recent days. The CDC and Census Bureau websites appear to be among the hardest hit. As of Tuesday, census.gov was still unusable. Krieger says if you're going to do replicable, reproducible science, you need access to the data. You have to have the data from the past. But hey, who gives a damn about science? And scientists brace for the worst. This is also from The Guardian by Oliver Millman, as Trump purges climate mentions from websites. Again, you know, the Republican Party is funded by fossil fuel billionaires. Fossil fuel billionaires have paid for much of the infrastructure that is, you know, that supports the GOP, from ALEC to the Heritage Foundation. It just goes on and on and on. All of these right-wing think tanks and systems, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, probably most of them, have the fingerprints of fossil fuel billionaires all over them. So, of course, Republicans are going to pretend that there's no such thing as global warming, so the fossil fuel billionaires can continue to extract as much fossil fuel as they can out of the ground and burn it into the air and make as much profit as they can so they can kick back some of that profit to the Republican Party and the individual Republican members of Congress. And so now here we have the Department of Defense's website has been scrapped, the climate portal, as has the climate change section on the Department of State. The climate content on the U.S. Agriculture Department has been removed, so farmers will no longer get information on how to deal with, you know, what's happening with climate change. An entire section on climate and sustainability hosted by the Department of Transportation has now vanished. Sean Duffy is the Transportation Secretary. He says the administration is focused on eliminating excessive regulations that have hindered economic growth, increased costs for American families, and prioritized far-left agendas over practical solutions. Right. You get the BS here? What they're really trying to do is increase profits for the fossil fuel industry, because the fossil fuel industry is one of the major funders of the GOP. It's really that simple. As Michael Mann said, you know, the climate scientist at the University of Pennsylvania, has been a frequent guest on this program. He said, we should plan for the worst. The keys to the car have been given to the polluters and fossil fuel plutocrats, and they intend to drive it off the climate cliff. And he points out that, you know, down in Florida, Ron DeSantis outlawed any government website mentioning climate change. And he believes that the Trump administration is going to do the same thing at the federal level. Federally funded highways, hospitals, schools, and other infrastructure will no longer have to adhere to tougher standards to withstand fiercer floods and storms. And while online information on the climate crisis is being scrubbed, this appears to be doing little to slow the crisis itself. Last month was the hottest January ever recorded globally by a sizable margin, scientists say, following on 2024 breaking records, on 2023 breaking records for heat as well. Mind-boggling. So what's going on with Ukraine and USAID? I'll tell you about that after the break. And RFK Jr.'s anti-vax group paid $1 million, or nearly $1 million, to women who accused him of sexual misconduct.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Bill Cassidy saying, yes, I support this guy. Yeah, right. And welcome back. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's on your mind today?
Well, I've been thinking about all the people that are apparently going to be losing their jobs. And I think Republicans think, oh, well, that's not going to affect me. But when you look at the local level, say a small town has a manufacturing plant and 3,000 people work there, and the plant decides to shut down and move to Mexico. That's 3,000 jobs that are suddenly gone. And that community has people who will no longer be going to the local barber shop or beauty shop to get a trim. They won't be going to the bakery to get some donuts. They won't be going to this or that. They won't be going to the car shop to get an oil change. They will put everything off to pay the mortgage, the water bill, the electric bill, and food.
Yep.
That will be their main focus. Everything else will just have to wait. Now, when you do that on a national level, that's called a Great Depression.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guarantee you, you don't want to see that. My parents grew up in that era in the 1920s and 30s. It was not fun.
Yeah,
People
my parents
put their
too.
children on trains in the Northeast and sent them alone across the country, hoping someone, somewhere, would adopt their child because they couldn't feed them.
Yep.
And in that instance, often the children, it depended on, okay, it's a 10-year-old boy. He's strong enough he can do the work on our farm or my shop. Yeah, I'll adopt him. Or maybe it's a little girl and maybe they've never been able to have kids. Maybe they'd adopt it. But most of it was free labor. It was not, oh, I'm looking for a child to adopt. No, it was not.
Well, and you have to know that they're anticipating this. I mean, you've got 4 Republican governors now who have gutted their child labor laws, starting with, Sarah Huckabee.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can work in a meatpacking plant in Iowa if you're 13 or 14.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy.
have at it.
No, I think you nailed it, Sandra. Sandra, thank you very much. It was brilliant. Thank you. Broachman in Wells, Vermont. Hey, Broach, what's up?
Yeah, hey, Tom. So here's my 2 cents. I think that as an operating strategy, what is being missed is the element of pressure, real pressure. Pressure has in nature the potential to change state. And as an operating strategy, I don't think it's being used. So this divides into 2 categories of pressure where it is needed. One is for all of us to get in tune to apply pressure, where some of that is happening. We're doing that. Some marches are beginning. That's all going to equal pressure. Some of it, and then the other half has to go to lawmakers. I don't see enough pressure, right? We're not seeing our lawmakers standing arm in arm like a wall and saying, absolutely no, we completely protest this. And by the way, let's see.
Here's a shocking statistic for you, Broach. The conservative Republican lawmakers get 11 times more calls from their constituents than do Democratic lawmakers. Now, the main reason for that is that there's 1,500 right-wing radio stations out there, and they're all telling their people to call their legislators. And there's only a handful, a couple of dozen progressive stations out there. There's a whole backstory to that, too. But You know, right now, public pressure is, literally 11 times stronger on conservatives to keep doing what Trump is doing than it is on liberals not to, which is shocking. It's just shocking. Roach, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out. "21 minutes past the hour, and this is amazing. The U.S. Agency for International Development, there's two federal departments that have been funneling money and resources, physical stuff as well, to Ukraine. The first, of course, is the Pentagon. We've been sending weapons to Ukraine. All of those weapons shipments kind of pretty much wrapped up with the end of the Biden administration. The other is the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And USAID, when we decided to give billions of dollars to Ukraine to deal with the attacks from Russia, and this is, like to feed people, to keep their schools running, to keep their government running, to rebuild their roads, to rebuild their power systems. This is all aid development, developmental aid. And it's all coming through USAID. It is, aid to Ukraine right now is 61% of USAID's budget. Because, when the Biden administration decided that they were going to give all this support to USAID, the 10,000 employees at USAID are staying home because Elon Musk told them to stay home. The money is not going out. And in Ukraine, they are scrambling. This is the headline over at Reuters. Ukraine aid groups cut services, scramble for cash after U.S. funding shock. It just goes right across the board of the damage that is being done in Ukraine to Ukrainians. Reuters notes, since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, the U.S. has been a major supplier of both military and developmental aid assistance. USAID has provided Ukraine with $2.6 billion in humanitarian aid, $5 billion in development assistance, and more than $30 billion in direct budget support, according to the agency. Now, that's $37 billion. The agency only has a 60-some-odd billion-dollar budget. Many local communities in Ukraine rely on aid and donor support to fund initiatives in education, health, energy, agriculture, and infrastructure. The United States was a development partner in more than 100 projects in Ukraine, ranging from investment and exports to sponsoring media, enhancing energy supplies, and supporting veterans, young people, and scientists. All frozen right now because of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Meanwhile, a woman who worked with the anti-vaccine nonprofit run by Bob Kennedy accused him of sexual misconduct and was paid nearly $1 million as part of an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, in 2020, according to multiple sources telling this to Mediaite. Diana Falzone reporting about this over at Mediaite.com. When asked about it, when he was asked by Senate Democrats about at least two of these misconduct claims against him, these sexual allegations of sexual misconduct, He said he wouldn't share the details of the agreements. He said, "Twice I have frivolous, unfounded allegations, which I strenuously denied at the time and continue to deny. I entered into confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements to prohibit these individuals from continuing to make these allegations." Oh, and you gave him $1 million, or almost $1 million, too. The payout was a high six-figure sum, under $1 million, sources said. This is a children's health defense, where he was the chairman up until announcing his run for president. And then again, this from media, I quote, "Kennedy has faced several allegations of misconduct. In July, a woman who Kennedy employed as a babysitter for his children in the late 90s accused him publicly of multiple instances of sexual misconduct, including groping her against her will. Kennedy said he did not remember the incident." Then there's his affair with Olivia Nuzzi, the New York Magazine correspondent. And in October, Mediaite reported that at least 3 women claimed to have had romantic relationships with Kennedy in the last year. And this morning, the Senate committee that he was before just voted him out. Just said, okay, cool. Well, we're going to send his nomination to the House, and everybody can vote on this and decide if they want Bob Kennedy running all of our health, all of our welfare, all of our health services. If we want this guy who wrote this just crazy book, he sent me a copy of it with a note, in it saying, read this and see what you think. And I've known Bob for years, and so I actually read his book, or at least a good chunk of it. And it just makes these wild allegations about Anthony Fauci. It was just, a hit job on Fauci. And I sent him back a note saying, "I'm sorry, I can't endorse the book, and I'm not going to, put you on as a guest about it." It's incredible that this guy, who has this long history of believing this one study that was done on fewer than 24 kids 20 some odd years ago that suggested there was a relationship between vaccines and autism. Autism typically starts showing up around the age of 2. And, that's when kids get vaccinated. So they said, oh, there must be a connection. Well, there have been dozens of studies done since then showing that there's absolutely no connection between vaccines and autism. There's something going on. We have, an explosion of autism. But is it vaccines? Doesn't appear to be. But still, he's going to be running our science, I guess.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Unless Bill Cassidy or somebody else has a change of conscience, and I'm not holding my breath on that. These Republicans are terrified of Trump. So what's on your mind? I'll pick up your calls after this.
Today's book in our book club is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, by this guy, Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using 3 simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race, or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for brown Arab in GOP speak, and immigration, aka brown people from south of our border, and socialism. Meanwhile, Republican secretaries of state across the nation are vigorously purging voters from the rolls. Over 17 million, more than 10% of America's active voters, in just the 2016-2018 period, according to NBC News. After the 5 Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, 14 GOP-controlled states moved within a year, some within days, to restrict access to the vote, particularly for communities of color, students, and retired people.
In North Carolina, for example, 158 polling places were permanently closed in the 40 counties with the most African-American voters just before the 2016 election, leading to a 16% decline in African-American early voting in that state. An MIT study found that nationwide, Hispanic voters wait 150% longer in line than white voters, and black voters can expect to wait 200% longer in line to vote. In Indiana, then Governor Mike Pence's new rigorous voter ID law caused an 11.5% drop in African-American voting. Students are suing for their right to vote, and retired people who no longer drive but care passionately about their Social Security and Medicare are being turned away at the polls by the hundreds of thousands because their driver's licenses have expired. The obvious failure of 40-plus years of Reaganomics and GOP policies to maintain a functional middle class in America has been a problem for the modern GOP. In 1974, for example, the GOP had outright control of only 7 states. The message, elect us and we'll help the rich people, just didn't generally resonate with American voters. It's the reason why, outside of the fluke elections of 46 and 52, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives outright for 3 generations, from 1933 to 1996, and controlled the Senate for most of that time. Desperate to win the presidency for the GOP in 1968, Richard Nixon went so far as to commit treason by torpedoing a peace deal with President Lyndon Johnson that President Lyndon Johnson had worked out with the North and South Vietnamese. According to Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, then president of Iran, Ronald Reagan did the same thing by cutting a deal with Iran whereby they would hold on to the U.S. embassy hostages until after the 1980 presidential election, torpedoing Jimmy Carter's chances of re-election. But in 2000, the GOP changed tactics. After Reagan was almost busted for his part in Iran-Contra, he testified that he had forgotten about details of the program more than 80 times. His growing Alzheimer's spared him an indictment. They realized that getting busted for treason wasn't worth the risk. They needed a plan B, and it was deliciously simple. If most voters don't like what you're selling, then just don't let them vote. Paul Wayward promoted this idea back in 1980 when he was campaigning for Reagan after Koch Foundation. And indeed, many Republican luminaries, such as William Rehnquist, who went from serving the GOP by standing in polling places and intimidating Hispanic and Native American voters in the 1960s to becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, rose up through the ranks by participating in Republican-run voter intimidation schemes. Voter suppression became the foundational go-to tactic for the GOP in 2000. Although the GOP attacked Democratic presidential nominee Al Gore with smear and innuendo, ridiculing him for helping write the legislation that created the modern internet, for example, the main thing that got George W. Bush into the White House was voter suppression. His brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Bush's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, threw somewhere between 20,000 and 90,000 African-American voters off the rolls. They were able to get the vote close enough that 5 Republican appointees to the Supreme Court functionally awarded Bush the presidency. The BBC covered this in 2001 in 2 major investigative reports that were seen all over the world, except on any American media. By 2016, the Republican Party had fine-tuned its voter suppression and intimidation systems to the point that they ran like well-oiled machines in nearly 30 states. Between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, for example, Ohio had purged more than 2 million voters from its rolls, the vast majority, more than 2 to 1, in heavily African-American and Hispanic counties. The 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court ruled in that they could keep it up. Other states have since adopted their new tactic of caging voters. The book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, by me. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
We turned our backs on what we need, chased the glitter, fed the greed. From Reagan's rise to Trump's parade, a billionaire kingdom we've remade. Free healthcare, it's just a dream, while yachts glide down a golden stream. We chose the few, forgot the rest, built this empire of excess. America chose wealth over well-being, blind to the pain its people are seeing. The homeless freeze, the hungry cry, while billionaires build towers in the sky. Oh, America, when will you see this gilded cage is not the land of the free?
Past the hour, welcome back. Amazing. The Trump's trade war, the authoritarian powers. I mean, it's just incredible. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Hey, I've been wondering about this USAID thing for literally years. And I always wanted to ask you because I have a lot of respect for the knowledge you've acquired on these things. But it just seemed too trivial. You know, I'm like, Thom Hartmann's not going to want to answer my question. But here's the thing, is they're conservatives, generally speaking, from my observation, have always hated USAID. And I couldn't figure out why. Like when I was in Iraq, I know, ironically, there was a shortage of eggs, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in the neighborhood of Iraq, Iran produces the most eggs. Now, why was there a shortage of eggs? Because we blew up the few chicken processing things Iraq had under Saddam.
As part of our shock and awe campaign, yeah.
Well, chicken, it can be used for biological weapons as well. But anywho, none of the plants I saw, and like I said, Iraq didn't have a whole lot, but the plants I saw were they were for, making consumer chicken stuff, right?
Right.
And they had no biological weapons use. Now, the thing is USAID came in and they said, look, we use cell phones from Iran, so we might as well buy eggs from Iran. Okay, the price is right. And I thought that's what it was. But now I'm not so sure because of this sovereign wealth fund thing that Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick are behind, advising Trump to start the United States on a sovereign wealth fund. And this is the part that's going to get on your nerves, Tom, because there are some Democrats that want a sovereign wealth fund as well, America to have one. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's more like, remember that time you were saying if Russia invaded and your neighbor was a racist and you guys had to fight the Russians, you would just suck it up and fight alongside a racist? All right, that's sort of the same deal. I think Trump and Elon Musk and these billionaires, they do not want to share what they consider weapons with guys like me and you. They want to in USAID. They don't want any sort of bureaucratic rules.
Dave, I think you're making it far more complicated than it needs to be. Conservatives hate USAID and have for years and years and years because it sends money mostly to black people and brown people. It's really that simple.
Well, yeah, and okay.
I mean, we're saving the lives of tens of millions of people a year around the world, and it's getting us alliances. And that's why, and it's incredible, the bang for the buck. I mean, a $60 billion agency, that's chump change. That's a rounding error in the federal budget. But it has, several dozen vital countries tied to us rather than to China or Russia. And now, of course, now that Trump has cut them off, where are they going to go? They need help. They're going to go to China and Russia. And guess who's enthusiastic about giving them that help? Xi is beside himself. He's so giddy about this. Putin is out there bragging about it, saying, oh, yeah, they're all going to bow down to Donald Trump. This is what's going on, Dave, is conservatives hate USAID and always have because it gives money to black and brown people. And it's just, I think it's just that simple. And now, of course, because it gives money to Ukraine, half of its budget is going to Ukraine.
Well, let me add this, Tom. Over the weekend, it got very little attention, but Trump fired 6 high-level Justice Department international cyber criminal sleuths, okay? And then Rubio negotiated a deal with Nayib Bukele down in El Salvador to house American prisoners. Tom, right. You, me, and Kenyatta, when we're in prison for political reasons, we're going to be down in El Salvador.
God
Look,
forbid.
man.
Well, and now Trump is preparing Guantanamo. He's setting Gitmo up for 30,000 Americans to be, or he says immigrants, to be stuck down there. I mean, this was when Hitler built Dachau, it was, oh yeah, these are for the foreigners. We're going to get the non-Germans out of here. We've seen this movie before. Dave, thanks for the call. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me all right?
Just fine, yes.
Okay. I have a message for Ronald Reagan. It's no longer morning in America. It's now midnight in America.
It's M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G in America.
Pardon?
It's M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G
Yeah, both.
in America.
Yes, both ways. I have a comment, but I want to address something that your previous caller mentioned. She said that her Social Security had been cut by some amount. I had a woman call me last night who had the same problem.
Really?
Not only had her Social Security check been cut by a fair amount, but she had lost most of her food stamps. She had been on disability as well for a while.
Uh-huh.
And that concerns me. Mine doesn't come in for another week or so I don't know.
Same here.
But I think it's important to realize that there are Social Security cuts being chopped off, not eliminated, but cut.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how that can be.
You know,
if I talk over you, it's because I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's...
my phone, I don't know what's wrong with it.
No, that's
but what
okay,
I wanted to say, my comment is this. I understand that every Republican is prepared to vote for Robert Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And if he is elected to office, our health and the health of the world is in great danger. And I'm very concerned not only about that man's being accepted, but all of them. I mean, he made some insane choices.
Yeah.
And not only do we now have a psychotic, insane, sadistic president, we have a cabinet that's just about as bad. And I'm very concerned about that. And I'm going to take you off the phone and listen to you on the TV.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I totally get it, and I share your concerns. I don't know what I can add to that. The Social Security thing, it's entirely possible that, these are just a couple of anecdotal reports that are not a trend. But let's see, over the next week or two, people call in, let us know if your Social Security check has been delayed or has been reduced. If Medicare is not getting paid, if something's going wrong, maybe we can have an early warning system here. So we'll see. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Well, let me say first, Tom, I don't know if we're going to have a bad connection here because the feed that I'm getting on your end is really being broken up. So hopefully you can hear me okay.
Oh, you sound fine, Kenyatta.
Great. Listen, as spectacularly stunning and burlesque Donald Trump's actions have been domestically, and a mere 2 weeks, it seems like it's been 2 years already.
Yeah.
I hope folks don't become distracted by the distractions. And let me tell you, let me elucidate what I'm talking about here. In 2016, when he was first elected, everyone worried he would start a war. And I've mentioned to you before during the election or the campaigns for the election that whoever was elected or selected would be a wartime president. Now, Trump's already started a war. He started a global trade war. I'm very, very concerned that Trump will foment shooting wars in particularly Iran via Israel and potentially in South and or Central America. With the Panama Canal stuff, he's got Marco Rubio, this pervert Hegsmith. I mean, this is. I don't. I'm not lost for words, being a wordsmith too often, but this is spectacular. It just really is.
It truly is.
And I wanted to mention to you, speaking of 2016, you may recall in 2016, maybe you don't, you and I had a very deep conversation talking about the nuclear clock. In 2016, the nuclear clock, or the doomsday clock as it's known, was at 3 minutes to midnight, the closest it's ever been. That was 9 years ago. Tom, do you know it's almost half that now? It's at 89 seconds to midnight.
I know. I saw the announcement, what was it, last Thursday, I think? Yeah, I get it, Kenyatta. This is, I remember, and I don't think you're old enough to remember, but I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis and being afraid that, we were all going to get wiped off the face of the earth. This seems to me like a far greater and more existential crisis than back in '62, and or '63, whatever year it was. And you know, it's why I show up every day. It's why I'm here talking. I know it's why you're writing your newsletter over on Substack. We need to wake people up. We need to keep this, get this country on track and solve its problems rather than, you know, what Trump is trying to do, which is take us back to the 19th century. It's crazy. Kenyatta, it's always nice to hear from you. Thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
The Democratic state attorneys general are telling people if you're a federal worker, don't take the buyout that Musk is offering. It may be BS. And welcome back. Daniel in Windsor, North Carolina. Hey, Daniel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. First, I wanted to say I enjoy your show.
Thank you.
And the next, I agree with you that the independent press and probably more content creators, I think we're going to probably have to kind of like do some of the jobs of the regular media and just say things on your regular podcast and broadcast and stuff like that that can reach your audience, no matter how small it is. And the other thing that I thought about was instead of people talking about marching and things, why don't they just start recalls of the Republican officials? And if you don't, like in North Carolina, I don't think we can recall our officials, but we definitely can try to get the House to impeach them. So I think the more we do those things to possibly change the balance of power that's, you know, in Congress, then we don't have to really wait until 2026.
Well,
and I
there's
wanted to hear what
actually,
you had to say about that.
yeah, over the course of the next year, I believe, there's 3 seats up for, via special elections in the House of Representatives. And if we could flip all 3 of those seats, then Hakeem Jeffries would become the Speaker of the House, and that would be the end of a lot of Donald Trump's power and the beginning of a whole lot of investigations. 3 seats. And
that would be great.
You can bet that the billionaires are pouring money into this thing, into these things, and frankly, I think we need to be too. So
yeah, because it's like this isn't really being even though they're reporting on it, it's not being televised like they did with the insurrection.
Yeah.
Because you could see people actually going to the Capitol building, but now you can't really see people going into the Treasury Department, taking over. It's like a few people just causing a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I think they should have arrested Elon Musk the first day he walked in anybody's office because he's not really.
I do too. I don't think he has the authority to do this, but the FBI is now captured too. Daniel, thank you for the call. Spot on. Thank you. Brendan in El Paso, Texas. Hey, Brendan, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Great. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I want to talk just a little bit about the decay of rural America. I mean, I'm from Texas, and there's all these small towns and hamlets and villages all over the state, and I've traveled through them. There's a YouTube channel too called Joe and Nick's Travels, and they document how dystopian these small towns have become. They are falling apart at the seams. Their infrastructure is no good. The roads and bridges are falling apart. There may be 2 or 3 police cars for a 70-mile radius. The towns are having declining populations, 20 less than what they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, and 30% of the populations are made up of elderly, mainly widowed women living on fixed incomes.
And you know what did it? You know what did it, Brendan? Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart, that's part of it. But these people live in food deserts. And
every Walmart that opens, 100 local businesses go out of business. And those local businesses generated local revenue and circulated money within the local economy. Whereas every night at every Walmart in the country, somebody pushes a button and all that money goes to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Right.
It's like a giant vacuum cleaner.
The sad thing about it is that 80%, 60, 70, 80% of these people vote for Donald Trump and the Republicans.
I know. It's because they're watching Fox News.
Yeah, and it's really sad because they're voting against their own best self-interest. And
I agree.
it's
Fox News has
tragedy.
branded itself as the country music, rural, we get you, network. And Democrats need to be doing the same. They haven't done that since FDR, and they need to get back to it. Brendan, thank you. You really put your finger on a problem. It's a huge one. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
I was tangled in the headlines, caught up in the noise. The weight of the world had stolen my joys. I grabbed my coat, left my phone behind. Told myself it's time to unwind. The city fades as the highway bends. The air turns clean where the pavement ends. Go find your mountain, your valley, your stream, where the air feels lighter and your soul can dream. When the world feels heavy, let it all fall away. There's peace in the wild where the trees softly sway.
Welcome back, 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Just a couple of things I thought of while I was on hold. That DEI equals e pluribus unum, and that
out of many one.
DEI is almost the same thing as e pluribus unum.
Oh yeah, out of many comes one. Out of diversity comes unity. Yes, absolutely. Excellent point, Bill.
Right, and I don't know why people don't push that one. It's on the money.
Well, it's a little. It requires a little thought, but yeah, I get it.
Right, and the other thing in terms of cosmetics, you should invest in lipsticks because that's what sold really well during the Depression. That's what women could afford for cosmetics. The other thing is that Musk is Trump's new Pence. In other words, Trump, is a lazy, son of whatever, and he does no work. He's got his executive time, and he won't even read anything. He said he didn't read the 2025 thing and everything. Right. And when Trump was first interviewed, when he first entered the presidency the first time, a reporter asked him, so what are you going to do about domestic politics? Domestic...
policy.
Domestic. Yeah. And he said, well, Pence will be taking care of that.
Right.
And he said, what about foreign policy? He said, oh, well, Pence is going to take care of that, too. Right. And the reporter said to him, well, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to make America great. And Pence is doing the same thing, except for he is a monarch. Corporations are monarchies. Mm-hmm. And every dollar they see belongs to them. Yep. And there you got the problem. Number one, Trump is lazy and doesn't read anything, doesn't care. And he brought in this guy who's not even legal. I understand he came into this country illegally too. He overstayed his visa.
That's one story. Yeah, it may be true. I can't vouch for it.
Right.
Apparently, he was here on a student visa and ceased to be a student. Yeah.
Right. And federal workers make up 20% of the GDP. So it's going to take a big hit on our GDP if he starts eliminating workers.
In large numbers, it will.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And mostly it's going to hit Washington, D.C., which is, a blue city, so Trump doesn't care.
Right. And, you commented on Koch's 1980 platform, and this pretty much fills the bill what they're after.
I think you're absolutely right, Bill. I do think that David Koch was way ahead of the curve here and has been the inspiration to the GOP ever since. Thank you, Bill. Jeremiah in Alexandria, Virginia, speaking of the D.C. area. Hey, Jeremiah, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How's it going today?
Good. What's up?
Good. So I was kind of mulling what was going on with Elon Musk and this whole takeover between him and these, 20-year-old kids that are basically hackers at the Department of Treasury. And I was digging around a little bit, and I found what could possibly be like a playbook model that they might be following, and that is Viktor Orban. After he came to power, he basically started pilfering people's pensions to pay for what he said was the national debt. And it's like, I mean, there's a lot of people around here, as you know, the government employee sector is huge in this area.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are in fear of, obviously not only losing their jobs, but, I'm thinking even these people that, they're retired or, could take an early retirement. I mean, that gives these guys access to pilfer their pensions, to pilfer Social Security, military benefits, like all this stuff. That could basically just become the Doge piggy bank for whatever they want to use it for. And it's pretty concerning. But, I looked it up. I, found some stuff on Reuters and everything. And that's basically what Viktor Orban was doing. And we all know how
Orban's not only the model. He came over here and spoke at a CPAC meeting down in Dallas, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and explicitly said, you need to do what I did in Hungary. He said, you need to start suing the media and shut down the state media, NPR, and replace it with media owned by your right-wing oligarchs, by your friends, and replace your judges, and just take over. And that's what's going on right now. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This Viktor Orban is the model. In fact, that's my article today over at HartmannReport.com. I agree. Jeremiah, thank you. Randy in Ackworth, Georgia. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Hartmann from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to disagree with you, and I may be misspoken, but yesterday, I think toward the end of your program, you had said that no news organization had reported on the disruption in
Los Angeles. Randy?
I'm sorry?
What did I miss? Who is reporting on that?
Well, no, but I actually did see it on the 5 last night, and my question to you is, do you think shutting down a freeway is a successful way to protest? And I've got another question after you answer that.
Well, history suggests that it is. Yeah, it's protest, if it's not disruptive, tends to be ignored. Shutting down the Edmund Pettus Bridge, for example, brought us the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So yeah, I absolutely think it is. Randy, thank you for the call. We're hitting the top of the hour here. On the other side of this break, Donald Trump's trade war, authoritarian power, oligarchs. Trump's guy at the Treasury just shut down the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and State Farm wants an emergency 22% rate hike on house insurance in California, and yet they're making billions.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Today we're reading from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is an 1856 first English translation edition of this author. And but you can still get it online. A lot of different booksellers sell it. This is from chapter 11. What sort of despotism democratic nations have to fear? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society, similar to that of the Americans, might offer singular facilities for the establishment of despotism. And I perceived, upon my return to Europe, how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, the sentiments, and the wants engendered by this same social condition for the purpose of extending the circle of their power. This led me to think that the nations of Christendom would perhaps eventually undergo some sort of oppression like that which hung over several of the nations of the ancient world. But it would seem that if despotism were to be established among the democratic nations of our days, it might assume a different character, different from the Roman Empire, for example. It might be more extensive and more mild. It would degrade men without tormenting them. I do not question that in an age of instruction and equality like our own, sovereigns might more easily succeed in collecting all political power into their own hands and might interfere more habitually and decidedly within the circle of private interests than any sovereign of antiquity ever could do. But the same principle of equality which facilitates despotism tempers its rigor. When no member of the community has much power or much wealth, tyranny is, as it were, without opportunities or a field of action. As all fortunes are scanty, the passions of men are naturally circumscribed, their imagination limited, their pleasures simple. This universal moderation moderates the sovereign himself and checks within certain limits the inordinate stretch of his own desires. Independently of these reasons, drawn from the nature of the state of society itself, I might add many others arising from causes beyond my subject, but I shall keep within the limits I have laid down to myself. Democratic governments may become violent and even cruel at certain periods of extreme effervescence or of great danger. Excuse me, think of George Bush and 9/11. But these crises will be rare and brief. When I consider the petty passions of our contemporaries, the mildness of their manners, the extent of their education, the purity of their religion, the gentleness of their morality, their regular and industrious habits, and the restraint with which they almost all observe in their vices, no less than in their virtues, I have no fear that they will meet with tyrants in their rulers, but rather guardians. I think then that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever existed before in our world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. I am trying myself to choose an expression which will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, but in vain. The old words, despotism and tyranny, are inappropriate. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it, I must attempt to define it. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an immutable multitude of men, all equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. Think now of a television society. Each of them, living apart, is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists, but in himself and for himself alone. And if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. Facebook? That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood, but it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that people should rejoice, providing that they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances, what remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? Thus, it every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrower range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and oftentimes to look on them as benefits. I have always thought that the servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind, which I have just described, might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereign of the people. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. They devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being in tutelage by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. And it continues. It's a brilliant book, A Democracy in America by de Tocqueville.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. The real reason, Robert Reich writes, that Trump is tearing up treaties is that they tie his hands and thereby limit his discretion to mete out punishments and rewards. You'll note, and Jon Stewart did in a big way last night, or maybe the night before last, that that Donald Trump said that he's imposing these tariffs on Mexico because our trade deal with Mexico is terrible. Now, the trade deal with Mexico that's in place right now is the one that Trump himself negotiated. So, I mean, go figure, right? But anyhow, Robert Reich goes on to say, don't think of these as individual policies. Think of them together as, and I agree with this. I don't think that he actually ever intended to follow through with tariffs on Mexico and Canada. I think this was a stunt so that we would look at that rather than be talking about his gutting the USAID office or going after the Education Department or installing 25-year-old hackers in the Treasury Department. I think what we're looking at here is a publicity stunt, frankly. The only country of the three countries that he put tariffs on or threatened to put tariffs on, the only one that didn't go along, tough luck, buddy. We're just going to wait until these tariffs go into effect, and then we're going to impose tariffs of our own on you, was China. Because Xi doesn't care what Trump does. Xi actually loves what Trump is doing because by gutting USAID, Trump is making a whole bunch of countries, particularly Africa and the Middle East, desperate, quickly desperate for the kind of aid that China has with their Belt and Road program now for, over a decade, been passing out to build strategic alliances with other countries. Robert Reich adds, if some senior Republicans, members of Congress, object that he's stepping on congressional prerogatives, so what? It's an opportunity to show him who's boss. If a federal court temporarily stops him, so what? He'll go right on doing it and demonstrate that the courts are powerless to stop him. He's on the verge of that right now. A federal court has said you've got to stop your aid freeze, and he said, tough luck, I'm going to do it anyway. Now, this will get to the Supreme Court and probably fairly quickly. Whether they do anything about it is another question. Whether the Supreme Court has any appetite for taking on Trump is another question. But we could be looking at an Andrew Jackson scenario here, where Andrew Jackson twice was shot down by the Supreme Court, once on the Second National Bank of America, which Jackson said was unconstitutional. He was going to shut down. The Supreme Court said, no, it's just fine. He shut it down anyway. And the second was the so-called Trail of Tears. Now, I realize much of that happened on the following presidency, but Jackson initiated that, and the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot move these people off their land in Georgia. And Jackson started the process anyway. And, famously said, Roger Taney has made his decision, let him enforce it. Roger Taney was the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court at the time. He was also the author of the Dred Scott decision in 1856. Robert Reich goes on to say, if prices skyrocket in America for oil and lumber from Canada or for fruits and vegetables from Mexico, no problem for Trump. Most Americans don't understand how tariffs work anyway. Trump will blame Canada and Mexico and then threaten them with, say, 50% tariffs. Kabam! And then Reich says, which brings us to the larger question. Why is Trump so obsessed with power? And he points out that the greater his ability to trade some of that power with people, what he wants is to alter the systems of government so that he himself and his rich friends can exploit them, so he can get richer. Reich says, I'm also referring to oligarchs in Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia. Keep in mind, Elon Musk couldn't have bought X without Saudi help. The Saudis are in on this thing. Saudi Arabia, of course, is not a democracy. He gives them, Robert Reich writes, he gives them special trade deals, energy deals, intelligence deals, access to global deposits of riches, or threatens to hold them back. In return, they give him and his family business deals, information, support in political campaigns, and more covert propaganda. I think Robert Reich has nailed it. What we're looking at here is an oligarchic takeover of the world, frankly. Meanwhile, Trump's Trump backers, Zuckerberg and Musk, hate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, the people who really hate it are the banks that it oversees, because it has recovered tens of billions of dollars from big banks who have ripped off people like you and me and forced those banks to give that money back to their customers. CFPB was created back out of the 2007, 2008 crash. It came out of the Dodd-Frank bill, which was the result of when George W. Bush, when Republicans deregulated Wall Street, and then, of course, Wall Street went nuts, with housing and just started betting like crazy on these mortgage-backed securities, and crashed the entire global financial system in 2008, in the last year of George Bush's presidency, the Great Bush Crash, the worst crash since the Great Depression. Out of that, we created the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau to protect people from people like Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin, who had robo-signings, or is alleged to have had robo-signings, and using those illegally, allegedly, to kick over 10,000 people out of their homes in California when he was running, I think it was called One West Bank. So here now, Scott Bessent, the billionaire who Donald Trump got in as our Treasury Secretary, has just ordered the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to halt work. Stop. No more. No more protecting consumers. Screw the consumers. Screw the consumers, screw the workers should be the new, slogan that's put up above the White House here. Sarah Dorn, writing for Forbes magazine. Forbes. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent ordered the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to halt work Monday following months of anti-CFPB sentiment from President Trump's billionaire backers, including Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Bessent told an agency staff in an email that they must stop all regulatory work and public communications of any type. It's incredible. Billionaires Mark Andreessen and Mark Zuckerberg lashed out at the agency, which threatened to sue Meta last year over allegations it improperly used financial data in its advertising business. Zuckerberg was complaining about this to Joe Rogan. The CFPB was formed, I'm sorry, I said it was formed in 2007. It was formed in 2011 in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So here we are. And finally, and then I'll pick up your calls here, State Farm Insurance. This is the largest home insurer in the state of California. Now, states regulate insurance because the insurance industry has been so notorious about ripping people off for a century or more. So every state in the union, because of the abuses that the insurance industry did, taking your money and refusing to pay, things like that. So they're all regulated now. And in California, of course, they're regulated. So State Farm says we need, because we had so many people lose their homes to these fires, we're looking at significant losses. We need to raise our rates 22%. They claim that they made Consumer Watchdog and LA-based advocacy group. Consumer Watchdog is an LA-based advocacy group. They said that State Farm made underwriting profits of $1.4 billion between 2020 and 2023, and that they have $134 billion in the bank. But they currently insure about 1 million homeowners in the state of California and have an additional 2.8 million other policies across the state. In June of last year, the company sought a 30% rate hike for homeowners' prices, as well as a 36% increase for condo owners and a 52% increase for renters. Now, the article doesn't say if they were granted that or not. I'm sorry, I don't know. They chose not to renew fire insurance for 1,600 State Farm customers in the Palisades neighborhood last year, according to California's insurance office. Grim stuff. This is, it's just like in Florida, just like along the coast, along the Gulf Coast, along the East Coast. Increasingly, we're seeing it's harder and harder to insure your home. And housing values are going to take a big hit. And why is this? Because of climate change. Pure and simple. This is all because of the lies that the fossil fuel industry told us and the Republicans that they own told us for the past 40 years.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Up next, your calls. Stay with us. And welcome back. Debbie in Sylvania, Ohio. Hey, Debbie, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to push back just a little bit on when you said that there are 11 times more calls going to Republicans than Democrats. And I don't doubt that there are that many more calls going to Republicans. But there are a lot of groups on Facebook that are mobilizing, saying call Republican senators, call Republican congressmen, push back on all this. So
the
I
11
don't
to
think
1 number is historic. It's not this week.
Okay. I thought you were saying right
over
now.
The last
but I called...
Republican senators and members of the House report about 11 times more calls than do Democrats.
Okay.
Now, it might be because
now,
Republicans were in constant rage during the Biden administration. I mean, I don't know why exactly that is.
That could be. I did, call Vance a few times. Sherrod Brown was my senator, and I called him to say, yeah, good job, go for it. The other thing, though, is there is a lot of pushback right now, and there's a app called 5calls.org. People can check it out. I've used it. It's another app that a lot of groups are recommending.
Yep.
You put in your zip code. It gives you the topics that you might want to call your representative or senators about.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, Indivisible has a great toolkit. Right now, the traffic is so heavy, you can't get to most of the tools. But, I think all those things, I think lots of people are mobilizing and pushing back and doing whatever they can. Isn't what I thought I'd be doing at 73. But, hey,
Welcome to the club,
I want to face my dad when I get where I'm going, because he was like your dad, a World War II veteran, and I want to tell him I did what I could.
Yeah,
so.
We fought the fascists, too. There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
I was probably looking at him going, oh, no. But anyways, and thanks for all you do, Tom,
Thank
really,
you,
and all your callers. It gives me, other than my great liberal friends and, like-minded people on social media, we have to stick together and encourage one another.
There you go. Yeah, as Ben Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much.
I thought of that yesterday.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good talking to you. Thank you. Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, thank you for taking my call. one point is you were talking a while back about using language when referring to Republicans. After watching your great show with Greg Palast, we need to stop calling Trump elected president.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris won the election.
Yeah.
So we need to stop doing that and say he stole the election. And my other point that I want to make is President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9877, Functions of the Armed Forces, in which he states, 1, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. 2nd, to maintain by timely and effective military action the security of the United States, its possessions, and areas of vital interest. Now, and I'm hoping maybe the military will do a counter coup, because what's going on right now is a coup.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
The FBI is starting to push back real seriously, Alfredo. I don't know what's happening with the military. I'm a little less sanguine about that. But all of this stuff, we need to keep a close eye on it. Alfredo, thank you. Great idea. 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Welcome back, 21 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Bill in Campwood, Texas. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was wondering if you could elaborate on Ken Martin's, the DNC chair, and what his politics are and what you think he'll do. Because they always say the same things at first, but what's your opinion?
I saw him on Rachel Maddow's show last night, and her response to him was sort of like, oh, no, happy talk. But I'm actually pretty optimistic about Ken Martin. Ken Martin started his political career working for Paul Wellstone. Paul Wellstone was, one of the most outspoken and competent progressives of my lifetime. And, died in a plane crash, but he was an amazing man. And then he took over he became the leader of the Democratic Party in Minnesota, and has been for, I guess, almost a decade. And under his management, Minnesota went from having Republican governors and independent governors to Democratic governors, and now there hasn't been a single Democrat who lost a statewide race since Ken Martin took over and being in charge in Minnesota. Sean has reached out to his office and out to the DNC. I mean, when it was both of the two previous DNC chairs were regularly on this program, just regular guests on this program, and I'm hopeful that Ken Martin will come on the program. I will be nice to him. I'm hopeful. I'm genuinely hopeful. So we'll see. But he's got a great past. Good. So as much as I liked Ben Wickler, because I know him, I've never met Ken Martin. I've met Ben a number of times. I have a really good feeling about Ken Martin. So we'll see. Bill, thanks for the call. Ed in Portland. Hey, Ed, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Got a new outrage from the Trump administration to share with you. So what I do for work, a great part of what I do is deal with import and export paperwork, because my company directly imports and directly exports. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was preparing a parcel for Canada when we were waiting for you to pick up the call. So because of all the confusion and the daily changes in what is supposedly going to happen, I needed to get some technical advice from the Customs and Border Protection for reasons I won't go into because of how long it would take to explain. But there's a phone number. So I expected to be on hold for 2 or 3 hours, and that was the price I was willing to pay. The phone number right now for domestic calls to cpb.gov takes you to an advertisement for Medicare Advantage.
Honest to God.
And you can't get out of it. It goes directly to let me sell you Medicare Advantage plans. Now, there's a number for international people to call, which is a different phone number. I called that. That did go through to the agency, although I wasn't able to get anywhere. But, of course, you can't sell a Medicare Advantage plan to somebody who's in Italy or Germany.
Right.
So
my guess is what happened, Ed, you know, these companies that Medicare Advantage is insanely profitable, and you can make a $2,000-3,000 profit on every sale that you make. So my guess is what these companies are doing is they're searching for federal phone numbers that have been posted on websites historically that have been removed and or are no longer in operation, and they're simply picking up those numbers in the hopes that...
No, this is the current number on the website for every single page when you click through.
No, I get that, but apparently it's no longer any good.
Oh, you mean what? If I understand you, you're saying that you think that the government decided to no longer have a helpline and abandon the phone number.
That's correct. And they just haven't updated their website yet.
I get that, but I wouldn't put it past this administration to make some money off their buddies by redirecting people.
Yeah, I don't think they have any interest in the federal government making money. I mean, if it went to an opportunity to buy a Trump,
a Tesla,
a Tesla or a Trump digital token, then that would make sense. But it sounds to me like this is fairly standard. There's a lot of websites and a lot of phone numbers that have floated around the internet for years and years that have been abandoned by companies and that have been picked up by these groups that are either selling Medicare Advantage or if it's a website, they want to hit you with spyware or malware, or get you to buy protection from spyware and all these other scams, and I don't know if the Nigerian princes are picking them up.
Tom, you're more generous in your read of the current moment than I am, but I'll go ahead and I acknowledge what you're saying. I can also tell you I'm having daily and weekly conversations with all the companies overseas that I do business with and have done for decades, and nobody knows what's up or down, and it's absolutely going to send it's going to send the economy into a tailspin. Have all this up and down, back and forth nonsense going on.
Yeah,
I
totally get it. I have a feeling, a very strong feeling, that Donald Trump is going to destroy our economy just like he did last time he was president. And
why aren't Republican voters who own small businesses paying attention to the damage?
I'm guessing some are, but many of them, hey, if you can trash black people and strip power away from women, they're good with it. They're willing to pay that price. I mean, that's how deep this racism goes in the GOP, Ed. Ed, I got to run, but thanks for the call. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. I'll be right back with you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Vince Houghton's Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. This is Chapter 7, Operation Northwoods. On April 17, 1961, more than 1,400 Cuban exiles forming the Brigada de Asalto 2506 landed on the beaches of Cuba at Playa Girón in the Bahia de Cojinos, the Bay of Pigs. Their mission was to overthrow the regime of Fidel Castro, Cuba's increasingly communist leader, who had himself overthrown the regime of American ally Batista just 2 years before. A communist leader just 90 miles from Key West was a rather painful thorn in the side of the newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, and his ouster was considered a high national security priority, as it had been for Kennedy's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was backed by the U.S. government and the CIA. We can argue why the Bay of Pigs invasion failed until we're blue in the face, and many people still do. For many in the Cuban exile community, the mission failed because JFK refused to give American naval and air support, elements called in for the original plan developed by the Eisenhower administration. Maybe this is true, Problem here is that we begin to descend into the realm of the counterfactuals, the if-onlys and what-ifs, things that we are doing our damnedest to avoid. Look, I've met a lot of the Cubans who took part in that invasion, many of whom are permanently settled in or around Miami, my hometown. They are impressive men, and I wouldn't put anything past them. If they say they could have kicked out Castro with U.S. naval and air support, who am I to argue? But I still will, because things are much more complicated from an intelligence perspective. Despite the lack of air and naval support, and despite the intensity and desire of the Cuban exile forces, it would have been immeasurably difficult to overcome one of the most problematic aspects of the entire invasion. Castro not only knew they were coming, he knew when and where they were coming. A combination of piss-poor information security, or in today's parlance, InfoSec, with the ability of Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Miami exile community meant that the secret mission to free Cuba of Castro was anything but secret. It's not like this was a huge surprise for the CIA or the U.S. military. The Cuban intelligence service was very good, and some in the exile community had loose lips. In this environment, it was nearly impossible to conduct effective counterintelligence and keep the invasion secret. Most telling of all, the Soviets had literally broadcast their knowledge of the mission 4 days before it happened. On April 13th, Radio Moscow released an English-language newscast in which they predicted an invasion of Cuba by CIA-trained exiles within the week. It seems they were trying to warn us against carrying out the invasion, a type of deterrence through propaganda. Hey, we know you're coming, so perhaps now is not a good time for your secret operation. Clearly, that didn't work. The blowback from the failed mission was significant on multiple levels. More than 100 members of the 2506 Brigade were killed in combat, along with 4 American volunteer pilots from the Alabama Air National Guard, who were contracted by the CIA. Hundreds more in Cuba would be executed in the days and weeks following the invasion, as Castro eliminated anyone suspected of abetting the exiles. More than 1,200 of the brigade would be captured by the Cuban government, and some of those members were subsequently executed. The Kennedy administration was embarrassed by the failed mission. The U.S. government looked inept and failing to maintain order even in its own backyard. In the zero-sum game of the Cold War, where victory for one of the superpowers was defeat for the other, this was a huge win for the Soviets. Not to mention that the invasion pushed Castro even more firmly into the Soviet sphere of influence. And as far as the strength of the regime was concerned, the Bay of Pigs invasion did the exact opposite of what was intended. It made Castro's regime more powerful than ever before. The operation was a great political victory for the Cubans at home and abroad. Castro was a hero in the eyes of his people for defeating the Yankee invasion and was able to consolidate his power. The fiasco also elevated the Cuban government to a newfound global status, transforming communist Cuba from a aggrieved little country to an equal in the eyes of the world. In fact, Argentinian physician turned Cuban revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara actually thanked the United States for the failed invasion. The CIA bore the brunt of the blame for the failed mission. President Kennedy fired CIA Director Allen Dulles, along with Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard M. Bissell, the 3 men who made up the core of the agency's leadership, particularly in the realm of covert action. Kennedy also removed, at least temporarily, major paramilitary operations from the purview of the CIA. For more than a decade, CIA had been the agency with primary responsibility for paramilitary covert operations, but now it was benched. Into the void leapt the U.S. military. In June 1961, about 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy approved National Security Action Memoranda 55, 56, and 57, which codified the shift in paramilitary responsibility from the CIA to the Pentagon. Nothing else really changed. The U.S. government was still looking for ways to oust Castro from power, just through a different government agency. By autumn, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary intelligence officer, or infamous, or both, depending on your perspective, was asked to brainstorm ideas to get rid of Fidel. He didn't disappoint. In February 1962, Lansdale provided a document titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba. Some of the actions are pretty good, some are quite silly, and some are downright abhorrent. The book is Nuking the Moon by Vince Houghton.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Started back in '64, a whisper in the halls, Goldwater's morning call, behind the country's walls. Stormer's book was passed around, fear was set in stone. The rich men lit the torches, claimed the Reds would take our home. They sold the fear, they sold the lie, wrapped in flags and battle cries. The GOP's long game, 60 years in disguise, selling fear to the people, feeding power to
About 36 minutes past the hour, and the DOJ, the Department of Justice, had demanded that the FBI turn over by noon today, which was just about 3 hours ago, Eastern time, by noon today, the names of all the FBI agents who had participated in prosecuting the January 6th insurrectionists, the traitors to our country, the people who tried to overthrow our government on behalf of Donald Trump. And the FBI had been pushing back and saying, no. Well, they just handed over 5,000 names. 5,000 names. Keep an eye on this. This has the potential to be huge. So what's on your mind today? Linda in McDonough, Georgia. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I had some concerns the other night after watching that PBS show, Finding Your Roots, with Henry Louis Gates. Mm-hmm. I started thinking, what if Trump tries to screw around with the census, the U.S. Census?
He's already taken the census website off. Apparently, the census website has just collapsed.
Yeah, well, here's where my concern came from originally, was that Senator Schatz, during the confirmation hearing for Secretary of Commerce, who is Howard Lutnick, Senator Schatz asked him, he says, what are your plans? Do you plan to keep the census as an apolitical manner? And Lutnick responded, I promise you we will count each whole person. That's what the Constitution says, and we will stick to it rigorously. And I started to think, well, what if, there was a time when African Americans were counted as 3/5. What if they're going to try to pull something to, make people not be counted as whole if they fall under the DEI umbrella?
That's so weird. I've never heard that phrase, whole person. You hear whole numbers, but whole person?
Yeah, he included that word, whole, and it really set off alarms for me.
Yeah, I think it's probably code for citizen. The Republicans have been saying for a long, long time that they want to only count citizens in the census. And in fact, I think that's what they tried to do under Trump, as I recall. But
yeah, but were African Americans considered citizens back then?
They weren't.
They were
not until the 1860s. And
yeah, they were 3/5 back then. And I'm concerned they're going to try to somehow stick something in somewhere that will declare any DEI type person, women, blacks, any minority.
I doubt that, Linda. I think what they're talking about is not counting immigrants who are not citizens. Because the whole reason for counting everybody, I mean, first of all, we didn't really have this strong notion of citizenship when the Constitution was written. It wasn't really until the 1880s, and then really it got nailed down in 1924, that we had very strict definitions of who was and wasn't a citizen of the United States. But the reason for counting everybody is to determine congressional apportionment. How many one congressperson for every 135,000 people or whatever the number is. And that then determines things like how much aid goes to individual communities, how many federal government resources go to individual communities. And the Republican story, the story that they've been telling themselves for years and years, is that Democratic cities have more non-citizens than Republican rural areas. So if we refuse to count the non-citizens in the Democratic cities, then what that will do is cut aid to those cities. In reality, some of your Republican states, particularly Texas and Florida, have the largest numbers of non-citizens in the United States. I think California actually might be number one, but and so they would be hit by this too. But my guess is that what he was trying to convey some kind of coded message about not counting non-citizens, because this has been this has been the bugbear for the Republicans for decades. I mean, for a long time. So we'll see. But Linda, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I was unaware of that. That's pretty shocking. Thank you. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, how's your walking and talking going?
Well, it's since the election, it's been hard to get out there and talk to white people.
Oh, really?
It's been hard for me to go out there and actually talk to white people. The black people I talk to are always wonderful, kind, polite, and they listen.
Yeah.
But I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If Musk transferred the file from Social Security, was this a straight transfer? As a computer person, I want to know if this was a copy, or was this transfer and delete, leaving him the only person in charge who has a copy of this file.
Which file are you talking about? I'm sorry, I missed a word or two there. My IFB fell out of my ear.
Yeah, well, I'm getting a lot of static off the phone the same way Kenyatta did. Yeah. But if you transfer a file, let's say you take it from this computer and put it on that computer.
Right.
You do it one of two ways. You either transfer straight across and you leave the file where it was, or you transfer and delete.
Correct.
Transferring and leaving the file leaves a copy, the original copy, on that system.
Right.
But if you transfer and delete, then he has the only current file of Social Security, of this fiscal management office or whatever.
Sure.
Okay? Other than the histories, there should be a backup every day, a backup every week, every month, quarterly, biannual, annual. Where do those files still exist? And also, did he transfer the money? Where is the money this office was controlling?
Well, the money
is gone.
Yeah, I don't think we know the answer to any of those questions, Norma, because this
yes,
process
well, why am I the only one asking?
Well, I don't think you are.
Why am I the only one asking? There got to be computer people who know this.
Yeah, Jamie Raskin was asking something very much like that yesterday when he was standing out in front of USAID. I get it, Norma. I mean, inquiring minds want to know, what the hell is Elon Musk doing with all of our data?
Yeah, well, you were talking earlier about, everybody keep a watch on Social Security. My sister's check should show up on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay? And, her whole age group, she's 77, and her whole age group is in her age group, even older, up to 90.
Yeah.
And those people, two of them are actually in nursing homes.
Yeah.
So if they don't get their Medicaid payment to the nursing home,
I would be very surprised if they're going to intentionally go after the benefits of people who are already receiving them. I think they're going to do what Reagan did, which is cut future benefits.
Well, I don't know. But if you stop and think about it, this would be a $1 trillion heist of the American economy, and this would put people in poverty overnight. It's not just losing jobs because nobody has any money to go shop. This means no money to do anything.
Well, they've got a big lift here. I'm sorry. Keep going, Norma.
Yeah, well, I live in a neighborhood with a lot of elderly people, of which, some of them, I keep an eye on, and we're a pretty tight group. But I know which ones are sick and which ones are in the bed and which ones, are getting Meals on Wheels. And my son, Trump supporter, told me that the reason they're getting rid of Meals on Wheels is the money was diverted to Hamas to feed those people. And I said, I don't know where you heard that.
That's nonsense,
yeah. I said, this is the kind of trash you're listening to. You are badly misinformed.
Yeah.
Because this neighborhood is full of Meals on Wheels, and I would have heard it. That has not been happening. And so this is the kind of stuff they're using to teach the people that what they're doing is good and great. Are you there, Tom?
Yeah, I get it, Norma. Thank you. I continue to think that they're not going to mess with existing people, but we'll see. I mean, flag us, let us know. Norma, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Paul in Zillow, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Well, Tom, I am a professional farm worker since 2004, and last week you made a statement about the fact that if people didn't hire illegal immigrants, they wouldn't be coming here, and that's absolutely true. I work in agriculture. I've worked with lots of people, most of them speaking Spanish, born in another country. And my congressman, Dan Newhouse, is a very wealthy farmer worth millions of dollars, and I'm sure his family's wealth is largely built on the backs of undocumented workers.
Yep.
When I started in 1984, probably 90% of the people I worked alongside were, as they called themselves at that time, wetbacks.
Yeah.
Less now.
Yeah.
Well, but the reality is, they wouldn't come here if somebody didn't hire them. And the problem is we should be deporting and I'm largely surrounded by corporate farms these days. Mm-hmm. We should be deporting those people.
The CEOs, yeah. No, I get it. When I was 16, I spent part of a summer up in Newego, Michigan, or White Cloud, Michigan, picking apples. 50 cents a lug is my recollection. And most of the people, in fact, all of the people that I was picking apples with were all local white people. And because it's just a very white part of Michigan. It's central northern Michigan. And that was the 60s. I mean, that all changed in the 80s and 90s after Reagan. It was the mid 80s when Reagan reformed, our immigration laws and then stopped the enforcement of the laws against hiring people who are not here with documentation. And I remember in the 80s, Louise and I were living in a big old house, and we had there were some rented rooms, and there was a guy living next door to us who was a construction worker, and he was making good money. And this was kind of the beginning of the whole Reagan takeover of all this stuff, or the opening the borders, as it were. And he was starting to complain about how he and people like him who were union labor were getting laid off, and they were being replaced with non-union labor who were not citizens. And it used to be that you had if you were in a carpenter's union, you had a damn good job in most parts of the United States. And now, not the case. And it used to be Dennis Weaver, the old TV star, if you're old enough to remember Dennis Weaver, from Gunsmoke and movies and everything. Dennis is an old friend of mine. And in fact, I wrote the foreword to his autobiography, which is called All the World's a Stage. And in that book, in his autobiography, and he's on this program, tells a story about how he was a migrant farm worker in Oregon picking strawberries back during the Great Depression. And, all of that work is now gone, or by and large. It's gone to people who really, should not be in this country, or at least we need to give people the right to be in this country. If we're gonna define how many immigrants we want to come into the country every year, which is a good idea, let's do that and give them some sort of actual legal status, the ability to be here. Paul, thanks for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's 49 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically, just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
There's a shadow on the nation, a chill in the air. A leader rises claiming he'll repair. But the cracks in the foundation, they're part of his plan to dismantle the democracy we built by hand. He calls the press the enemy, rewrites the truth, turns allies into traitors, empowers the uncouth. Courts packed with loyalists, the rule of law bends. Will we watch in silence as our freedom ends? Do not obey in advance, don't fall in line. When the strong man calls, remember the signs. Question the orders, resist the dance. Save democracy, not obey in advance.
52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Gar in Atlanta. Hey, Gar, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
Fine, thank you.
Very interesting show.
Thank you.
But I'd like to give you a suggestion. I want to keep it short and sweet. A suggestion to you. They put on a show on how you become a billionaire. You probably got a lot of listeners who are millionaires, but a billionaire. Yeah. How you become a billionaire from A to Z? Well, I'd like to hear a show like that.
More than half of the billionaires in America started out with massive inherited wealth, so that's a great place to start. Most of the rest of them started out fairly wealthy. I mean, Bill Gates' father was on this program about, 12, 15 years ago before he died. He was advocating, an inheritance tax. And he told me and my audience how he was a wealthy, as I recall, he was an attorney, and he made a lot of money, a fair amount of money. I mean, he wasn't a billionaire or anything close to it, but Bill was able to, go to the finest schools basically and have, all the great advantages that allowed him to start Microsoft, or for that matter, allowed him to buy the original MS-DOS operating system for $50,000 that started, Microsoft. So, that's your best starting point, Gar, is to have wealthy parents if you want to become a billionaire.
Because the reason why, you remember that program they used to have back in the day called I Want to Be a Millionaire? It was something about a millionaire.
Yeah.
And the person became a millionaire. and they wanted to see how a millionaire lived.
Right.
But now a millionaire, you're probably a millionaire. The billionaires are to a different level.
Well, the average cost of an American home right now is just short of $500,000. So there's probably a lot of people whose net worth is $1 million or more. It doesn't mean what it did 30 years ago, certainly. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Gar, thank you. That's a great idea. Matt in Spokane. Hey, Matt, Washington. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. This is Matt. I was listening to the hearings today on fentanyl, and a couple things came up, just to remind people that these are poisoning, not overdoses. The vast majority of these are poisoning, not overdose. But when they started going into the numbers, they would say that there's over 100,000 fentanyl and other drug overdoses.
Right, fentanyl.
And over and over they keep saying that, but in reality, if you segregate fentanyl, it's down to 77,000 a year when it reached a high of 120,000 under Trump. And so in no way do they make any attempt to acknowledge the effort that people are trying to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
So instead of saying 77,000, they just throw the 100,000 number out there because that sounds worse.
Sure. And they're aggregating fentanyl deaths with those from prescribed opioids and black market opioids. Everything from OxyContin to just your generic opioids and heroin as well. But yeah, the problem with fentanyl is that it's so cheap to make. That's the big problem.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and just one other question, just get some advice from you. I'm a veteran. I spent 6 years in the Coast Guard. I went to sea. I was on ships. I was involved in mostly, like one of my duties was taking care of the American flag and making sure all the flags and signals were right off the ship. And during the first Trump administration, as I've always done, I continue to fly my flag on my porch on special holidays, national holidays. I've always done that. If every once in a while I miss one. But, when Trump was elected president, I've made a resolution that I will not fly my American flag from my porch for the next 4 years. I'm not going to do it, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm done with that.
Well,
I just wondered your thoughts on that type of person.
I'm really torn by that. I've debated for years, Matt. I've never flown a flag outside my home. I've never, felt the need for that kind of performative patriotism. But I don't want to surrender our national logo to the GOP. I think we need to claim patriotism and claim the flag as our own as well.
Yeah, well, they've hijacked our anthem. What's next?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it, and this has got to be a real struggle for people. But I don't have any specific advice or thoughts for you on that, Matt. I'm torn, frankly. Matt, thanks for the call and thanks for your service to the country and for giving us a shout. And we're hitting the end of the show here. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag your it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.